everyone, and welcome to my little studio space where I do crafty things. In this video we're going to be turning a paperback book into a hardback book. There's a real unpleasant bend in the spine here, so my first order of business is to use the heat gun to melt the glue a bit to allow me to reverse the bend in the spine. I need to measure out some even spaces here, because what I'm going to do is saw some shallow little grooves into the spine so that I can lay some thread into that groove in order to really strengthen the bind, because it's really just glue that's holding this thing together. So in order to make it a more sturdy binding, I want to get some thread into it and really rough it up to add some mull as well, and make sure that it all sticks together really strongly. These grooves I'm making are really shallow. If you make them too deep, it'll obviously interfere with how the book opens. So despite how intense this looks, it's really quite shallow grooves. What you're seeing here is me really just roughing up the glue surface, giving it a lot of fine grit in order for the glue to really sink into it and grip it better. Because as I glue the mel onto it, if it was still smooth, the adhesion wouldn't be as strong. Laying the thread into the grooves will give this binding a lot more strength than it originally had, which will serve it well to last longer. This material is called mel, and it's traditionally used to be glued onto the spines of books, and it helps strengthen the binding and also is involved in attaching the boards to the book as it gets glued to the boards as well. I left it to dry overnight, and this is the result. going to be measuring and cutting some end papers to add to the book. This is an extra leaf of paper that I'm measuring and cutting, which will be glued past the front end paper because I want to add illustration in the front of the book, and I'm going to stick the illustration onto this little piece of paper. I'm just folding a little crease into the edge of the paper to make it bend more easily and comfortably at the front of the book. Now to glue them in place. I'm now just going to be trimming off the little overhanging bits of paper from the end papers. I'm just going to be trimming the little loops of string here, and what I'm going to do next is using an awl or a needle. I'm starting to separate the threads of these little loose strings so that I can fan them out and make them flat. This will also strengthen their bond to the paper when I glue them down. So I have to carefully unpick every little thread that you see here. I'll just show you the first few and then skip forward. And here's the final result, all unpicked, and I'm going to glue them down to the book. I'm using a acid-free PVA because this won't degrade over time. It won't make the pages go yellow or anything like that, so it should be more stable. So if you can use an acid-free glue, that's always the best. And here it's been left to dry overnight, the next day, and the next thing that we're going to be dealing with is the page edges. We're going to take a look at them in our clamp and then sand them to be nice and smooth in order to prepare for painting the page edges. needs to be very firmly secured so that it can handle being sanded. This is a very long process, so I've cut it down quite brutally because it's not much fun to watch. I'm now going to just paint on a wheat paste glue, quite a weak solution of a wheat paste glue. What this does is that it fills the micro gaps in the pages just on the front edge and gives a really smooth surface to apply the paint to. You just want to do a really thin coat and then let it dry. And now I'm going to use a diluted acrylic paint to paint the edges. In this case I'm going with a carbon black. Unfortunately my camera does stop recording without me knowing, but I did 3 coats per side per edge, and as you can see here, it turned out well, and there's going to be a little bit of footage of me here just basically loosening up the pages, which is got to be done gently, especially with this kind of cheaper paperback paper. It's very easy for it to tear, so be gentle in how you release the page edges. I'm also going to be attaching a ribbon to be used as a bookmark for while you're reading the book. I'm now going to create some decorative leather end bands. This gets glued along the top edge of the spine at the top and bottom, just to improve the look. It's purely decorative. I'm going to be folding this leather around another little cord of leather, so I need to make it as thin as possible, so I'm just busy shaving it down. Now I'm just going to slice the little cords of leather that I'm going to fold the black leather around. Now I'm going to carefully roll the thinned edge of leather around the brown leather cord. And now to glue it onto the book. Now I'm going to be creating the book boards. I've got it into 2 pieces per board, mainly because on the front board I want to cut a little recess in which I can add an Eye of Sauron motif into it. In order to ensure that the boards are the same on the front and back, I just decided to glue 2 cardboard pieces together for both boards, just to keep them exactly the same. So what you see me do here is just get my measurements and figure out where the center is so that I can draw my circular recess shape in order to create the space for that Sauron's eye. I left the boards dry overnight, and yeah, happy with a little recess that's been added. I now want to temporarily attach the boards to the book in a fixed position so that I can plan for attaching and gluing the leather in place. I still have to build the spine, but it helps me to just have a fixed position for the boards, so that I can position the leather and get my measurements right. If you don't have any kind of double-sided tape on hand, this is a little trick to get that same effect. I basically just make a little roll of paper and basically creating my own little double-sided tube of tape. With the boards in place, I can now get my measurements, and I'm going to start making the hollow tube back of the spine. The hollow tube allows the book to open correctly and flex without damaging the spine. And with that, the hollow tube is complete. I'm now going to move on to creating some little bands of leather, which I glue to the spine because I want decorative ridges in the leather. Now I'm just going to glue this string of twine underneath the edge of the hollow tube that extends beyond the spine. It just adds a little bit more robustness to this ledge, and it'll look better once the leather is folded around it. Of course, I do this for both sides. Now we're going to cut some leather and get it glued onto the spine. I also have to thin the edges of this leather because I'm going to be folding this leather around the hollow edge of the book tube that I added to the spine. And if you don't thin it out, it can get really thick and create an unpleasant bulge there. And I'll thin the sides as well so that where it meets the paper of the book cloth in this case, it won't stick out as way higher than the book cloth. It's quite a slow and laborious process. Leather is expensive, so if you cut through all the way, it can literally waste a whole big piece of leather. So I had to go slow and carefully. So I'm going to basically skip forward quite far to the end, but you get the gist of it. So here you can see all the edges all the way around are being thinned out, and now you can see that where you fold it over, it's quite a neat and thin fold. That's the goal. Alright, glue down time. It's probably more recommended to use paste at this phase if you want more time to manipulate the leather. I'm using PVA in this case, and I wish I'd used the paste, because then I could have manipulated the leather a little bit more, but it still turns out fine. But yeah, recommend using paste to glue down your leather. Because I'm using PVA and the drying time is much shorter, I do it half at a time. So the top half, and then I work it into the grooves, and then I glue the second half. This allows me to not have to rush too much in gluing it down. I'm using a bone folder here to really manipulate the leather into the edges of that leather strip that I glued onto the spine, and yeah, you can keep working it and pushing it in until you get a satisfying harder edge to that glued edge. I don't get a good recorded angle of it, but what I'm going to be doing now is gluing the edges of the book as well. So over those cords that I glued on the hollow spine and down onto the board, I'm now smoothing the leather and gluing it securely down the side of the book. Now, as it gets ready to dry overnight, the last thing I'm going to do is use this thread to bind the leather as tightly as I can on either side of those bands. That should ensure that it dries really tight to those bands and has an appealing shape to it. Alright, it's dried overnight. I can now release all of that tension and move on to trimming the excess leather and finishing the spine. because the leather is glued to the boards, I no longer need these temporary double-sided tape tubes that I made to hold the book together. So I'm just going to remove them now before I forget. Unfortunately, my camera does cut out again while I'm doing the final step of folding the leather round and down into the tube, into the hollow tube. You've got to be careful not to glue the tube closed at this phase. But yeah, basically I'm just going to be manipulating the leather down into the hollow tube and onto the book boards on the inside. And now for gluing the book cloth to the boards. You can see there's a little circle in the cloth. That's because I did a test fit where I kind of positioned it and ran a bone folder into that groove. It also helps me find the same position again. And now using PVA glue, I am gluing the book cloth down. I repeat this process for the front and the back, and at last we can glue the end papers to the boards on the inner side. This essentially completes the main construction of the book. Now I'm going to add some non-stick paper and let it sit for the night under pressure. Now we're going to move on to the final decorative elements of the book, including the Eye of Sauron motif and the final frontispiece illustration that I'm going to be adding. Oh, and of course the spine label. These are some Eye of Sauron designs that are based off of the eye that Tolkien himself drew when he was designing the Eye of Sauron and the Ringverse. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the tools that would allow me to do leatherwork letters on a spine label. So what I do is I print my labels and I'll make them as good as I can. One thing I like to do is to hide the edge of the paper by colouring it black. This makes it not stand out when it's glued onto the spine. I wanted to do something special for this copy of this book, so I decided to do a frontispiece where I would hand draw the wording of The Lord of the Rings and draw a black rider hunting for the ring. So yeah, I hope you enjoy watching the process of drawing that out, and attaching it to the front page of the book. I'm using a putty eraser here to lighten my initial line work before doing the final drawing. Very lightly blocking in the figure here just to make sure that I get the proportions and spacing right. And then we'll go into a nice little speed draw of the final drawing. Hope you enjoy. The last thing I'm doing here is cutting some crystal paper to act as a protection, a smudge guard for this drawing on the front page. And yeah, I'm about to do the final reveal of how this book and art turned out. Thank you for watching.